Ramesh, welcome. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. Can you tell me a bit about you and your role at Brandsmiths?
Hi Frankie, great to be here. Yes, I am in the commercial and corporate team.
Okay,
I've been at Brandsmiths now for nearly 7 years. I started out as a paralegal and then made my way up through the firm.
amazing.
Now working with Bianca, of course, in the commercial team, but I also really enjoy corporate work.
Okay,
That's more my specialty, really,
yeah,
and something that I want to keep improving on and growing in the firm. So yeah, I do mostly the corporate work, but also lots of commercial work, which is non-contentious work. So that's things that generally don't involve litigation, going to court or judges and things like that.
so you're trying to kind of settle it outside of
Yeah.
taking it
When
that
when
far.
I first started, I was mainly doing litigation.
Okay,
So it's actually really good to have a background in that
yeah,
because when you work in the non-contentious space, you see, having been in the litigation space, you see the kind of problems and disputes that arise. So
yeah,
you approach it from a perspective of how can we mitigate risk,
yeah.
things like that.
And
Have-
how did you get into law? How did you know that you wanted to become a lawyer?
Well, it's interesting because I only got into it when I only started studying law. I did what's called the GDL, like a conversion course, when I was 26.
Okay,
So I actually did Arabic at university, and
right.
I worked in various different sectors. And I guess I just wanted something kind of vocational, something that suited my fortes, I guess,
Yeah,
and something that I was interested in. In fact, whilst I don't do any criminal law, I
yeah,
was quite interested in criminal law.
yeah,
That I just found it very fascinating. And
yeah.
then as I studied it, I realised actually contract law and commercial law was A, better suited to me, and B, something that I enjoyed a bit more.
Yeah.
So
And you spoke a minute ago about how you specialize in the corporate side. Can you tell us a little bit about what your kind of day to day looks like in the work that you're doing with clients?
yeah, sure. So I guess you can kind of split it into two things on the corporate side. One of them is what is known in the trade as mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah.
So that will be either advising the buyer of a company or a buyer of a company or a seller of the company. And obviously you have different aims depending on who you act for. So you go from the due diligence stage. This could go over, a couple of months almost.
Yeah.
So it's not every day varies, in terms of what you need to be doing. But yeah, due diligence, that's the initial stage.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you buy a house, you do the searches and things like that. It's no different really when you buy a company. You want to
Yeah.
make sure you know what you're buying, right through to completion. So that's one. That's kind of the quite big transactions, but the more, I suppose, bitty or individual transactions are to do with corporate governance, really. So advising particularly small to medium enterprises and founders on how they can, yeah, protect themselves or bring in investment, for example, and the terms around that.
Yeah.
Um, so that's more a day-to-day kind of thing and varies depending on the client.
And with the kind of work that you're doing with founders, do you see a lot that, founders, businesses aren't necessarily set up maybe how founders had desired? What advice would you give to people who are launching their own companies and wanting to get those right structures in place?
Yeah, I've seen that quite a lot. I've seen disputes that when I was actually in litigation, there were lots of disputes around this because there wasn't a proper corporate governance in place
Yeah,
or there weren't clear terms. So yeah, my advice would be, whilst it is an initial expense, it will mitigate risk, but also it will give you like an active role. It will give you some potentially power or leverage over the other shareholders.
yeah,
Ultimately, you're a founder, right? It's your baby. You want to protect it. You want not. It's not just about money. It's also about the ethos of the company and the
yeah,
direction that the company goes in. And I've seen, yeah, quite a few cases where the founders of the company have unwittingly kind of relinquished some control of the company without really being aware of what's going on.
yeah,
So, yeah, there's a number of, or the shareholders agreement is like one of the key things that I would advise getting set up when you set up a company the first time if you've got more than one shareholder, so that you as the founder have control over the key decisions that the company makes.
yeah,
And you also have control over who can sell shares, and you can have first dibs. For example, if one of the shareholders wants to leave, you can keep those shares within the shareholders, or with people that you know.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I would definitely advise doing that.
And I think it's having that clarity as a founder to know where you stand as well. It's just helpful when you're building
Yeah.
your business to know kind of, and it's something that I've learned as well that it's really really needed on there.
I kind of see it as part of, it's like a business. You wouldn't start a company without a business plan, right? And
Yeah.
I think the corporate governance is part of your business plan ultimately, because
Yeah.
you're seeing the plan where you're going to be in a year's time. How much control do I want? How much control can I relinquish?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to take risk. You need to give some control away
Yeah.
to raise money, for example, through investors coming in and
Yeah.
buying shares or whatever.
And do you what sort of size are the clients that you're working with? Like, what's your ideal client look like?
Most of the clients, my ideal client would be a kind of small to medium-sized enterprise, because you get to be involved right from the start and you go through the journey with them.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a more kind of a personable relationship with them that you wouldn't necessarily get with a big firm,
Yeah.
where you'd be dealing with lots of different people and not necessarily the people at the top. And there'll be different expectations and stuff. And also, I think you get personal, because you've been there from the start. You see, and we've got lots of brands who've come in and done really well for themselves. And you go to the supermarket, you see their products, for example, like,
Yeah.
wow, I was part of that. So I think that's for me the ideal client, and the client that we usually have, we're kind of brand smiths for brands for small to medium enterprises. I wouldn't say it's boutique anymore, because we were growing quite quickly, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely for those kind of businesses.
And is your experience of have you only been through you've only come through Brandsmiths, you haven't been at other places?
Yeah, that's correct. So I did the legal practice course, as it was then,
Okay.
and then did work experience here,
Yeah.
and then was given a paralegal contract basically.
And what do you think is the big difference? Because obviously there's lots of big corporate kind of finance firms. Why would a founder potentially choose you over one of those kind of bigger corporations?
I think Brands Business is quite unique in that we give quite clear, concise advice. We're not afraid to kind of put our heads above the parapet. I
Yeah.
think a lot of other law firms will give some kind of advice, which, well, you could do this, you could also do that, and they're kind of covering their asses, as we say.
Yeah.
Um, and I think Bransons will give you not just a legal perspective, but also a commercial perspective. So we are your partners. We will come with you on this journey,
Yeah.
and not just give you legal advice, but how you can make your company a success.
Yeah.
So
And I really like the fact that also you're founder led. So obviously Adam, who I've got the pleasure of speaking to later, is very actively involved in the business. Have you been able to work closely with him and learn a lot from him?
absolutely, yeah. I mean, especially when I first started, he was much more involved in the legal work. As it's grown, he's probably less involved, but I still work with him on a lot of things, and I've learned a huge amount from him, and he's quite personable as well. He's the kind of guy who it is less of a hierarchy. You speak to him as you would to someone of the same level as you. So,
Yeah.
and he's got great experience, obviously.
Yeah.
In
But also for those kind of businesses that you're working with, it's great that you're kind of still have that kind of founder startup focus. It's similar to the companies that you're
That's what I
working with.
Adam has tried to keep that ethos going, really, and it's difficult because as you grow, it can get watered down a little bit,
Yeah.
as it's just natural, isn't it? But I think we've managed to keep a good ethos here and a good working environment here, so
Yeah.
it's great.
And perfect. And do you work with a whole range of companies and brands. Is there any traits that you think the founders have in common that makes their company so successful?
Oh, that's a good question. I think probably the main thing that they would have in common, I would say, is passion,
Yeah.
is a belief, and they're making this company. It's not just about money. It's like I said earlier, going back to this point about ethos. Like, they want to achieve something. They want to make the world a better place often,
Yeah.
um, and they also want to like employ people and like create opportunities for younger people, for example.
Yeah.
So I think that's like the key thing is like passion,
And loving what you're doing.
loving what you're doing, and
Yeah.
like really believing in what you're doing.
Perfect, thank you. And if you had to kind of, you've been on this journey since for qualifying and all the things that you've been up to over the last few years, what's your biggest lesson that you've learned throughout this period, qualifying to become a lawyer?
I would say having an eye for detail. I think that's a really key skill for lawyers to have, what we call the legal eagle. But yeah, having a real eye for detail, like not shirking on something, making sure that you've gone through everything twice. You made sure that you're not missing anything. Because you're like in everything in life, you write an email and then you go over that email again and go, oh, I could actually can say it in a better way, you know. So I think that's probably the key thing, is kind of not thinking the job's done, really making sure that you've got everything correct.
And earlier you mentioned about kind of mergers and acquisitions and that side of the work that you do, which probably means that you've got to keep up to date with all the things that are going on in the world. Is there, any kind of podcasts or books or anything that kind of has really inspired your interest in business and that side of the things you're doing?
Um, I read a lot of news, I guess. So, I mean, not necessarily a podcast. I do listen to politics podcasts, like The
Okay.
Rest of Politics, things like that, that do mention the business world.
Yeah.
Um, so I kind of have an interest in it from almost like a political perspective.
Yeah.
So, in terms of books, I'm not so sure. I'm more of a podcast listener, I've got to say, or like I read online news and things like that.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of it come up there.
I've thrown you on the spot there. But just on that mergers and acquisitions space, it's obviously very interesting times at the moment. Are you seeing a kind of slowdown in the amount of activity that you're seeing at the moment in from a buying and selling perspective, or are you seeing that there's a bit of a flurry ahead of the budget?
I must say that there has been a little bit of a slowdown, I think.
Yeah.
But what I have noticed, not in the last few years, is that a lot of Americans are coming over and trying to invest in football clubs. So we've advised a few clients on that.
Yeah.
So that does seem to be something that's kind of up and coming, really. There's a lot of American investment coming in, particularly to football clubs and things like that.
Yeah.
But not just that as well, other things.
Yeah.
Um,
We're seeing that on the investment side as
Yeah.
well. Americans kind of looking beyond America, which is quite rare since Donald Trump comes in, and where they can invest their money.